Hey guys, it's Mike, and thanks for tuning in. This is Mike's Rockin' Relics, and today the relic that we're going to look at is this original handbill from the San Francisco International Pop Festival, which took place in 1968 in October. And this is the original advertising handbill that came out to promote that. And on the back we have a bunch of information about the festival. And there's a lot of discussion with the great 60s rock festivals, obviously Woodstock and Monterey Pop and the Isle of Wight. And nobody really talks about this one, but this was a killer lineup. And I'm going to show you some of the bands that took part in this today and talk about some of the records that would have been active at the time of this festival and what the bands would have been touring. So stay tuned. We'll have a little look and go back in time to the fall of 1968 and the San Francisco International Pop Festival. So if you're new to collecting, one of the cool things that you can find once in a while is handbills, and they're like a postcard, and that's sort of how they worked. They were given out to advertise festivals and shows. A lot of the Fillmore West shows and Avalon Ballroom and things like that in San Francisco had handbills, and on the front it would usually have some kind of artwork and image, and on the back would tell you about information about where it was. There's a map on this one, if I zoom in here a little bit for you. And this is all of the locations where tickets would have been sold and available. And the Saturday and Sunday lineup, which is what we're going to talk about today. So that's what would be on these. And this is an original 1968 handbill. I honestly don't know how these survive. And they're not really that expensive either. So they're affordable for the most part, and somehow have managed to exist for over 50 years and just kind of survive all that, we think these would have been tossed as soon as the festival happened. So they're pretty hard to believe that they still exist. But here they are, and this is a fun thing to collect. They don't take up a lot of space, and I like to see if I can find them when I'm out, but they are hard to track down. But there you go. That's a handbill. So on the Saturday of the festival, it was a Saturday-Sunday festival, the doors opened at 8 a.m. and the first act was to hit the stage at 10 a.m. And so this festival took place entirely during the daytime. And I don't know if there was lighting at night for people to get in and out or what happened. I don't know if there was camping on site either. I get the kind of impression that there wasn't. But it was at a fairgrounds. And it was moved from an original location not far away, but to the fairgrounds. The original spot, there was a lot of fear that the hippies would take over the community, and eventually it was shut down and moved to this location. So, but the first act on at 10 a.m. was Johnny Rivers. I only have one Johnny Rivers in my album in my collection, and that is this Greatest Hits, but he would have been a fantastic opener and very lively. As you can see on his Greatest Hits record, he did a couple of big Chuck Berry covers. But Mountain of Love and Seventh Son and Secret Agent Man, Poor Side of Town, these were all big hits for Johnny Rivers, and he would have been an entertaining opening act for the festival. And next on the bill was none other than Eric Burdon and the Animals, and in 1968 they would have been touring the album The Twain Shall Meet, which is a cool psychedelic rock record. There's a little bit of sluggish material on here, but there's some other interesting things. Their sort of recapture and recount of the Monterey Pop Festival is on here with a song called Monterey, and the big hit Sky Pilot is also on here as well. There's a bit of anti-war sentiment going throughout the record, and it's a very interesting listen and one of the more psychedelic offerings from Eric Burdon and the Animals. So that would have been the material that they were focused on a lot at that show, and the album that was currently out for them at that time. Up next was one of the first true heavy rock bands of all time, and this is Iron Butterfly, and they would have had an album that came out in June of 1968 that they would have been playing a lot of material from, and that is Inagata Devita, and I'm sure they would have played this song at the festival. And this was probably right at their peak and when they were at their fuzz tone psychedelic greatness. And this would have been a fantastic live set. So, going from Johnny Rivers to the Animals to now Iron Butterfly, you can see the sort of expansive sounds that would have been coming from the stage, and such a variety. And a lot of these 60s festivals had such a wide variety of music at them. So they were next, and that would have been a fantastic set. Another act up on that Saturday was the Fraternity of Man, and these guys are another psychedelic act that would have been very different sounding. Their big kind of claim to fame song was a track called Don't Bogart That Joint, although I think it actually might have had a slightly different name. I kind of always call it that, but Don't Bogart Me is the name of that song. But you might know it more as that. So that is the Fraternity of Man. They would have been next up on the bill, and a pretty interesting act to see as well that day. And another band who performed on the Saturday was the Buddy Miles Express, and Electric Church would have been released just after this performance. So probably a lot of material from here would have found its way into the show. This is prior to Buddy Miles joining Jimi Hendrix's band of Gypsies, and there is speculation, or at least I've heard people say, that Hendrix was at this festival and that he possibly played. I've never been able to confirm that. He's not on any of the advertisements, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. And so if you know, or if you were there, I'd love to hear in the comments if Hendrix actually was there or did perform at all during the festival. But certainly Buddy Miles was, and this is definitely a great album to check out if you want to get into his style of stuff. It's pretty interesting stuff. In '68, Buddy Miles was also playing with Electric Flag and was a founding member of the Electric Flag, and A Long Time Coming is a great record to check out of theirs, and that had Mike Bloomfield in the band as well, and just fabulous band. That's Buddy right there. And that's definitely one to check out. Many years ago, I was lucky enough to be given an original set of his drumsticks by his estate, and they sent me these, which was fantastic. And he also played with Carlos Santana, and of course Jimi Hendrix. But what a great drummer and a great performer. And little known fact, he was also the lead singer of the California Raisins. The other two acts on Saturday I know very little about. One was Jose Feliciano, who was a Puerto Rican guitarist and singer-songwriter. He is famous for writing the song that we sing over the holidays called Feliz Navidad. He did write that song. He performed on the Saturday, and so did a group called Rejoice, and I don't know anything about them. I don't know who they were, and I've never seen a record by them. So if you know anything about Rejoice, I'd love to hear about that in the comments. Let me know. I'm not aware of who they were. So that was the Saturday, October 26th show. The Sunday was incredible. So let's take a look at what happened on Sunday. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you're a big fan of rock and roll and you like records, guitars, and stories about rock and roll, be sure to give us a like and subscribe and ring that bell. It helps us to grow the channel and keep more stuff coming. Thanks a lot. First on the bill on Sunday was the Chambers Brothers, and they would have been performing their hit Time Has Come Today, and that's probably what they're most well known for, I would think. And this is the record that song appeared on. Up next is Canned Heat, and in '68 they released two albums. The first one was this, Boogie with Canned Heat, and the song on here, On the Road Again, is one of my favorite Canned Heat tunes, and they were a festival favorite by all accounts at this point. They released another album in 1968, the same month that they performed at the San Francisco International Pop Festival, and that was Living the Blues. And this one has Going Up the Country on there, which would become really famous and linked with the Woodstock Festival a year later. But it came out the same month they performed here, so I'm wondering if they played that song or not. But Probably one of their more popular tunes for sure. Up next is a band called the Grassroots, and at that time they were playing songs off of an album called Feelings, which didn't chart very well, and if I'm honest, is okay. I think the album that you need for the Grassroots is Golden Grass. It's a greatest hits. Really, unless you're an absolute diehard, this will do just fine and will give you all of the major tunes that would have been available around that time. And this actually came out in '68, so it was sort of also an album that would have covered a lot of ground that you would have needed to. But that is the Grassroots, and they were next. Up next was a British band called Procol Harum, and they were just off the million-selling Whiter Shade of Pale single. And the next album was Shine On Brightly, and this is a great follow-up. They changed the lineup for this record, and this showcases, there's a song on here called Wish Me Well, which really showcases Robin Trower's guitar work when he was with them and before all his solo stuff and Hendrix stylings. Very, very good. And there's an 18-minute side 2 on this album, which was kind of around the same time as Iron Butterfly, and it also kind of predates a lot of the British prog movement that was starting to happen with bands like the Nice and the Moody Blues and things like that. So this was a bit of ahead of its time. I'm not sure how it would have went over at this festival, but it would have been great to see Procol Harum. Up next would have been Deep Purple, and in '68, Deep Purple was not the famous Mark II lineup, but did have Ritchie Blackmore, but John Lord was here and Ian Pace was here. Not Ian Gillan singing and not Roger Glover on the bass. And the album that would have come out the same month and almost the same day as this festival is The Book of Taliesin. And it's a very, very interesting listen. There's some crazy cover songs on here, including the Beatles' We Can Work It Out, and a really good version of a Neil Diamond song called Kentucky Woman. And they do a pretty ripping job of that. And there's another song on here called Ring That Neck that is also very great Ritchie Blackmore style guitar playing with John Lord on the keyboard. So this is early Deep Purple, and again would have been pretty experimental for a lot of the audience. Certainly wasn't the Summer of Love hippie movement stuff that San Francisco was known for. This would have been a much edgier, harder rock influenced sound. Next up is one of the bands that would be one of the arguably greatest bands of the late 1960s and one of the biggest bands of the U.S. for sure. Creedence Clearwater Revival. Their debut album would have been released in July of '68, so just a few months prior to this festival. And on the strength of the hit Susie Q, the cover of the Dale Hawkins track, they were starting to make some noise in the Bay Area and would have been a band that people would have been aware of, but had not yet recorded a lot of their classic hits that they're known for now. So it would have been an interesting time to see them right on the verge of becoming the largest band of the end of the '60s. So pretty cool, and it would have been an interesting set for sure to see what they were playing at that time. And the last band on the bill was a group called The Loading Zone, and I don't have the Loading Zone record. Bit of a one-hit, one-record wonder out of the Bay Area at that time. They would have been local favorites in San Francisco. Kind of a cosmic R&B sound. They weren't really psychedelic. And from what I've heard and listened to, I kind of see why they didn't catch on. They were sort of trying for the same sound as Blood, Sweat and Tears in Chicago and some of those horn bands, but didn't quite get it and didn't quite land it the same way with the same proficiency. So they were definitely one on the bill that was a bit of a dud maybe, but I'm sure a lot of people still enjoyed it and still own that record now. I don't happen to have that one, so that's the one album I don't have. So it would have been a fantastic event and a cool festival. When you think of how many of these bands, this would have been early days for their sets. So Iron Butterfly, Procol Harum, Deep Purple, Creedence Clearwater, and Canned Heat were all fairly early on in their career in '68, and a year later would have been kind of starting to cross over into that bigger stardom and bigger venue acts. So it would have been an interesting time to see them. And for all of the psychedelic connections with San Francisco, a lot of these bands don't really, in my mind, kind of sound like San Francisco bands. And there's not a lot of San Francisco-based bands on the bill, which is kind of interesting as well. You don't see Jefferson Airplane, Santana, Steve Miller Band, Grateful Dead, things like this that you kind of would have expected in 1968 to see at a local festival like that. So it's interesting, and the lineup is really varied and somewhat confusing for a lot of listeners, maybe. But when you look at a lot of bills from this era, it was not uncommon to have completely different sounding acts on the same show, and it would have made for a very interesting time. And the one thing you can say is each act on this bill is very original and don't sound like other people. So when you name these groups, you can kind of hear their sound in your head and go, yep, that's them. And they don't sound like a lot of other bands. So it would have been an interesting festival. If you were there or know somebody who was there, I'd love to hear from you because I'd like to see what that was all about. And this festival happened 11 years before I was born. So I certainly was not aware of anything happening at this time. But it would have been a very cool festival to attend, and I'd love to hear from you if you did. Let me know in your collection if you have any of these records. They're great listens and kind of a reminder of a time capsule in history when music was so unique and experimental and original and very good. So I hope you like that look at the San Francisco International Pop Festival, which took place in October of 1968. Thanks for watching. Keep on collecting. We'll see you next time.